This is Inside the BFA, the official podcast of the Balloon Federation of America. Each episode of Inside the BFA is an open discussion of the many aspects of the sport of ballooning and the BFA's work to represent its members and the ballooning community at large. Now, here's your host, editor of the BFA's Ballooning Journal, Glenn Moyer.
And hello and welcome to another edition of Inside the BFA. I'm Glenn Moyer. And tonight our subject can be wrapped up in one word. It's a gas. This evening we're going to be talking about gas ballooning, the part of the BFA that you sometimes don't hear nearly as much as you should. And specifically, we're going to be looking back at the Gordon Bennett race that took place in September, looking forward to next year's race a bit, and talking about the strategies involved and, as I say, just gas ballooning in general. We have a literal who's who of gas ballooning in the United States joining us as guests tonight. So let me introduce them to you in no particular order. First of all, Noah Forden. Noah has been flying hot air balloons since the late 1980s and gas balloons for about 10 years now. He has flown in 4 Gordon Bennett races and 4 America's Challenge races, placing first in 2021. He and his co-pilot, Brenda Kalishaw, set a record with their 4th place finish in the Gordon Bennett in 2023, traveling 2,223 kilometers. That is more than any other Americans in the entire history of the race, dating all the way back to its beginnings in 1906. Noah is an aerospace mechanical engineer, has worked for the likes of Stumpf Balloons, Raven and Aerostar, and Lockheed Martin Aeronautics, where he designed interplanetary spacecraft for NASA. He is both balloon and fixed wing rated, and currently he is the vice chairman of the BFA's gas division. Another pilot joining us tonight, my good friend John Petrin, is a past multiple world and U.S. national champion in hot air balloons. He's formerly ranked the #1 pilot in the world, currently the general manager of U.S. operations for Ultra Magic Balloons, and following a long and previous association with Lindstrand Balloons here in the U.S. His first gas flight was with the late David Levin in the early 1990s. He is a past director of the America's Challenge gas balloon race, was deputy director of the Gordon Bennett race when it was held in Albuquerque in 2023. He has flown in past America's Challenge races, but this year actually, 2025, was his first time competing in the Gordon Bennett and the first time flying gas balloons in Europe. Brenda Kalishaw represents the softer side of our sport this evening, and I mean that very sincerely. She's a very dear friend. She obtained her private pilot's license for ballooning in 1996 and her commercial in 2000. She began gas training and had that airborne heater limitation removed in 2017. She has participated in 3 America's Challenge races and 3 Gordon Bennetts. As noted earlier, she and co-pilot Noah Forden set a record with their 4th place Gordon Bennett finish in 2023, traveling 2,223 kilometers in total. Randy Wells is joining us tonight. Randy is the Team USA Command Center lead for the 68th Coupe Aeronautique Gordon Bennett race in Metz. Randy has also participated in the command centers for the 2019 America's Challenge and the 2023 America's Challenge / Gordon Bennett in Albuquerque, as well as the 2024 Gordon Bennett in Munster, Germany. In addition to his support for gas balloon races, Randy has actively participated in hot air ballooning since 2008. He's crewed for pilots in regional, national, and international competition, and he invested in his passion for the sport by buying his first balloon in 2017. Named it Maybe, and proceeded to earn his pilot's license in 2020. So Randy Wells is joining us. Finally, tonight, Don Day is joining us. He is the president and chief meteorologist of Day Weather, Inc., a Cheyenne, Wyoming-based weather forecasting consulting firm. Many of you are no doubt familiar with him. Don was the chief meteorologist for Felix Baumgartner's record and groundbreaking Red Bull Stratospheric, say that 5 times fast, skydive in 2012. He was also the chief meteorologist of Google's Alan Eustace stratospheric jump, in 2014. Don was also the lead weather advisor for skydiver Luke Aiken's heaven-sent no parachute jump. You may have seen that on the Fox network in 2016, as well as a weather advisor producer for magician David Blaine's Ascension flight in 2020. Don is a private rated hot air balloon pilot. So those are our guests for this evening. Welcome to each of you, and thanks for being with us tonight. We're going to get started with some questions about piloting in the Gordon Bennett. The Gordon Bennett being a long-distance gas balloon race, a duration race, unlike the typical hot air flight where hot air pilots go out, we fly for 45 minutes to an hour, we land and we pack up and we go socialize. The Gordon Bennett, as you know, requires flights of 2, 3, sometimes 4 days and nights. And so that requires 2 pilots. So throw this opening question to all of you that have flown as pilots. The chemistry between 2 people has to be very important to spend 2 to 4 days in that very confined 4-foot square space, so to speak, in a ballooning cubicle in your basket. How do you share the responsibilities between you, and how much of a role does chemistry between 2 people play? And I'll throw that to any of the pilots to get us started. Don't everybody jump in at once.
I'll speak up. So I think Noah and I, when we first flew together in 2023 for the Gordon Bennett, we had only been talking on the phone for about 3 weeks. That's as far as really our contact had been up to that point. I think we'd said hi to each other a couple of times in passing otherwise, but we really didn't know each other at all. And so the big thing that we did is we made sure that we communicated. I mean, anything we're thinking, anything that's being considered, we just talk out loud a lot. And so I think that that's really helpful in having, that partnership. As far as the part where, you're trying to take over different responsibilities and so on, we just make those decisions as we went along. We take turns. Somebody's trying to rest while the other person's flying, and you do have to trust that person for sure. I think you have to have a lot of the same ideas around risk mitigation, risk management. What are your ideas around safety? So I think you have to be like-minded with that. Otherwise, you're going to have one pilot that is awake the entire flight.
Johnny, I know, I'm guessing you and Jim have been friends for quite some number of years. So was the chemistry, was the organization a bit different with you as a team?
Yeah, actually, Jim and I had flown in the gas balloon together 2 or 3 times. So we both kind of knew what we were getting into when we agreed to go. And ours started with just a big conversation beforehand, and kind of I laid out to Jim my expectations. Jim laid out his expectations, and we both kind of talked about how close we wanted to dance with thunderstorms and wind, and kind of what our parameters were. And instantly we were kind of on the same page, and we had the same agenda. So that part worked really well. I can't imagine being in the gas balloon basket for 2 hours, let alone 48 hours, with somebody that you weren't on the same page with, or didn't have or had differing opinions. So I think that's super important for everybody to be on the same page.
You both brought up this being on the same page idea, and I'm curious, once you've agreed to fly as a team, and you've decided to go together into this event, how soon do you start? Because the Gordon Bennett requires a great deal of strategy and process, I would think, in competing. So how soon do you start? John, you talked just then about being on the same page about how close do you want to dance with thunderstorms or weather or winds. How soon do you start those discussions and plotting strategy, race strategy, what it is that you hope to achieve, how you're going to achieve it? Surely that doesn't just wait until a couple of nights before, when you get the first early weather forecasting.
No, I'm sure Donald, I think we started asking him, or I started asking for trajectories 2 weeks out, and he just laughed at us. But no, I mean, it started in March for us, when we kind of decided to try to do this, and looking at the map, where is Metz, France? What are the winds traditionally doing? And kind of between Jim and I, the only way we thought we'd have a chance to win the event was if the winds were going straight to the west and we were headed to the coast, and we could kind of steer the balloon in 24 hours to the furthest point. We knew we didn't have the ability to go to 18,000 feet for 3 days and brave the cold and the oxygen. But so yeah, it's just kind of, we started watching, and then a week before the event, you start seeing trajectories and start thinking things. And this year was unique. It looked like there were two different strategies, especially leading up to the launch. There was the thought of going north over a lot of water, or the thought of trying to go to the east and over the mountains, and then turning to the south. So you start watching it long before you should. Honestly, we should have not really paid any attention to strategy until the next morning after we launched, in hindsight. But no, it's fun, and that's the game. I mean, being able to do this on your cell phone. The last time I flew gas balloons was long before Facebook, and cell phones were brand new. So being able to run trajectories on my cell phone in the basket was a lot of fun. I burned up a lot of batteries doing that.
So Don, what is your role with regard to advising the teams? And I know for a number of years, at least my impression is for a number of years, each team tended to have their own Met man or weather person, weather advisor. And now sometimes, and we'll get into this in a moment, talking with Randy about a team command center. But as the Met man, what is your role in advising the pilots, and how much say do you have? Is it a decision the pilots make? Do you make the decision? Who decides it's time to go up, it's time to come down?
Well, it always goes back on the PICs in terms of making those decisions. And Brenda brought up the word risk. And that's something that I look at each race is, what is the acceptable level of risk that the pilots are willing to endure with the weather that John brought up earlier? And then how can I advise a path, a trajectory, different altitudes to minimize weather risk and at the same time be competitive? A lot of times you got to strike a balance. You can be very aggressive and be able to say, all right, I'm willing to fly in anything if that means I can win. Or you could say, I want to be competitive, but I don't want to fly in a thunderstorm. So you have to balance all of those things and then put together sort of a thumbnail sketch plan on what the weather will allow us to do and how much risk is going to be involved once they're up into the air. And then it's a living, breathing trajectory once they're up in the air, where you do have to be nimble and you do have to be able to adjust. It's like a sports analogy. You can have the best game plan before kickoff. 3 minutes into the first quarter, the game plan's out the window.
Right. Does that become more difficult when you're now, let's say, advising 1, 2, or 3 teams? And I'm just going to throw this out as a hypothetical. Let's say you have John and Jim flying in one balloon, and they have a certain parameter as far as safety is concerned and how far out on the limb they're willing to go weather-wise. You have Noah and Brenda in another balloon, and they have a different set of parameters. They have, let's say, a much greater propensity to go to the extreme. Does that make your job more difficult then in trying to advise the two teams?
In years past, yes, before Mr. Wells got us organized into a command center. Because I remember doing America's Challenges where I was advising 4 teams and they were all over, in terms of what their risks were. But by Randy assembling this command center, this team concept has made my job much, much easier.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, Randy, because I know Brenda's the first one who brought this command center idea to my attention. And as I understand it, a lot of the European nations were already doing this, where if a nation that has multiple teams, 2 or 3 teams competing, they got together with a single command center to advise the teams as a whole. And again, if I misspeak, please correct me, but my understanding is the Americans were a little slow to come to this idea to get all the teams united and working with a command center. Give me a little bit of background on what is the role of the command center and how do you operate as far as advising the teams, and what are the benefits now of having teams that I guess a little bit like NASCAR, they're working for the betterment of the whole, and yet each team is competing individually at the same time.
Absolutely. So the command center team and the initial conversations I had with the pilots earlier this year started a few months out ahead of the event. We had 5 meetings over about a 7-week period, not only with the 6 pilots competing, but we actually had a command center team of 12 individuals made up of experienced gas balloonists. Of course, Don Day and Randy Lefevre providing the weather support and strategy. Also was very fortunate this year to gain a few individuals who have had experience working on the America's Challenge command centers in the past, so very familiar with the airspaces. A lot of this and organizing it together, there's a lot of information, and that's really been my role, bringing that together, looking at the schedules, having the conversations with the pilots of their goals and limitations, as Don mentioned as well, organizing the team, looking ahead at airspaces across Europe. There's a lot of challenges that we don't face here in the U.S., such as some countries you can only fly during the daytime in the balloon, fly in VFR. So understanding what those challenges are and making sure the team is organized and prepared leading up to the start of the event. Once we all actually arrived in France, there were several meetings the day before and even the day of launch among the command center team to ensure that we were all in sync, tracking all the information that we need to have leading up to the launch of the balloons.
All right, let's backtrack for a moment then, and because I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I'm sort of assuming that most of our viewers are probably familiar with gas ballooning, but I'm sure there are some hot air folks out there that really have very little knowledge of that side of the sport. Noah, you've been quiet so far, so I'm going to bring you in here. Let's go back and discuss for a moment, what are some of the key challenges of gas ballooning versus hot air ballooning, and how do you deal with those? And what's the overall objective, particularly of the Gordon Bennett race, because it is the world's most prestigious ballooning event?
Is getting the furthest distance from the launch point. It doesn't matter how long it takes to get there or what route you take. It's the distance measured, the great circle distance from A to B, launch to landing. The challenges, the greatest challenges, I think, in gas ballooning races like these is fatigue for the pilots anyway. Fatigue is really a risk that we need to manage very carefully. If we're tired, we're not getting good rest, we're not making good decisions. And you had mentioned chemistry earlier, and for me, that's the biggest thing is watching out for each other while we're in the basket. If one of us is very tired, try to help to make up for that. Give your pilot more time to rest, because being tired and being fatigued is very dangerous. But yeah, that's the big difference to me is just you're up there a long time. It's cold. You're on oxygen. You're busy. You're constantly working on a puzzle. Whether it's systems in the basket, whether it's what trajectory should we take, what direction is going to give us the best possibility for success. And so you're constantly working, and it's very tiring. It's very it's a lot. So getting good rest is critical. Having the basket set up so that you can get good rest is very critical. So we actually worked on that this year. How can we make more of a nest so you can really get good rest and feel relieved once you wake up to be able to fly the next 4 or 5 hours.
We're going to talk about that in a moment, and that's a good transition to get into the section of our discussion tonight where let's talk a little bit about the differences, the aircraft in general, the gas balloon. You're talking about rest there, Noah. I can recall years ago when I was at Thunder and Colt Balloons, we built a gas balloon basket for David Levin, and I've seen this on other balloons, watching videos and pictures of Gordon Bennett's in the past years. Back in the 1990s when we did this, we thought it was very revolutionary, but it actually had a little flap door that you could unbuckle from inside the basket and fold it out so that when the pilot lay down to get rest, you could actually put your feet outside the basket, and it was sealed with balloon fabric around it. So it was a nice little cubby hole so that you could stretch out and get some rest. We'll talk more about eating and sleeping on the flights here in a few minutes. Let's talk about some of the basics of the aircraft. And I think we've got a picture from the launch last year. One of the very basic questions that I've always had, there's the picture. And you see in the picture, why is it most gas balloons are white? Does the color make a difference? Am I that simple-minded that white actually makes some sort of a difference or has an advantage in gas flying? And I'll throw that to well, Brenda, I'll let you go. I guess I'll kind of direct these questions as we go.
Yeah, definitely makes a difference. The white doesn't absorb the light in the same way that like the yellow balloons do even. So those yellow balloons that you see definitely will not be able to traditionally fly as long as a lot of the white balloons will be able to because of that. So during that day, you get that solar heating, which expands the gas and therefore causes you to rise. And if you want to stay at a certain altitude, you're going to have to vent some of that hydrogen. So you're losing hydrogen. It's a constant balance between keeping the hydrogen that you've got already in there, because you only get the one fill, versus what sand you have remaining. So that's definitely part of it, and that's why you see so many white balloons.
In recent years too, there's been the development of the quick fill balloon. Bert Padelt, who we all know well in the BFA, has built some of those balloons. Is there a significant difference in a quick fill balloon that inflates very much, to my mind anyway, like a hot air balloon? You put a little bit of hydrogen in and boom, it pops up, and then you just fill it out, versus the old netted style, the old, one diamond up, as the book was famously titled. There's one of the old netted style. Any advantage from one over the other, Johnny, in flight?
The netted balloons, that's what I started in, and I don't have that many friends anymore. They take a lot of people to fill sandbags and to put that balloon in the air. But there is an advantage. It's got a secure net around it. It's probably technically a little bit safer of a system, and also I think it's a little easier to inflate those balloons in some higher wind, because you're kind of keeping it lower to the ground and filling it up, and you can let it up as it goes. But it's kind of hard to beat the quick fill balloon. I think in less than 45 minutes, we turned gas on and our balloon was full, and we had the diffuser detached and we were ready to go. So it's just preference, but you don't see many brand new netted balloons anymore for sure.
I'm remembering, I think, a story from back in the early days of the BFA and ballooning that I believe Connie Wolf was involved in, when there was a gas balloon that ruptured. And a benefit, as I recall the story, of the netted balloon is that the deflating envelope then essentially was absorbed up into the net and created a sort of parachute to allow them to. Am I the only one who recalls that story? And is this ringing a bell with anybody? No.
I think all gas balloons are designed to do that. Even a quick fill balloon is designed to operate as a parachute if need be. Yeah, it's obviously necessary to cut as much ballast away as possible to limit your weight, to make that descent rate more manageable. But even quick fill balloons are designed to do that.
Noah, you spoke earlier about being very busy. And again, I think we have a photograph to kind of illustrate this. I'm curious, how much gear is carried in a gas balloon flight in a basket for a flight of this type of duration of 2, 3, 4 days in the Gordon Bennett? And how is it all powered? There's a great picture of two pilots, and look at all that gear. And goodness gracious, where does all that go? How do you guys sort that out? What are some of the bits of equipment that are carried on board?
Well, in one aspect, this is a giant camping trip in the sky, a very technical camping trip with a lot of gear.
That's a great description, by the way. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So we have a lot of things that need power. We have solar panels. We have batteries to store energy that we collect during the day. Some pilots in Europe actually use fuel cells that are powered by methanol. So you'll see blue and pink 5-liter containers of methanol that they take up to power their fuel cell to run their equipment. But our avionics are powered by the batteries. We have night lights that make us visible to other aircraft. We have internal lights in the basket so we can see what we're doing. We've got our tablets that show, other aircraft in our airspace, what the airspace is. It shows us some of the weather. We've got communications gear for communicating with air traffic control, for communicating with our command center. This year, most of the teams are flying with Starlinks. So we have full internet while we're up there. Some of the teams this year were actually watching the Gordon Bennett TV during the race, which is kind of funny. Yeah, so that's kind of the electrical stuff. But then there's also the sleeping gear and the cold weather gear, oxygen if we're going to be high. There's stuff for if you got to use a bathroom. Of course, we don't have a bathroom, but we carry some stuff to be able to take care of that. We've got what else? We've got about 1,200 pounds of sand when we launch. We've got water, drinking water. We've got extra water for when we land. If we land in the wilderness, we've got to have contingencies for making sure we're okay before somebody can get out to us. So we plan for that. But yeah, there's a lot to sort out, and we're going over lists for months before the race, and who's responsible for bringing this, and where is it, and how much does it weigh, and how are we going to carry it, and for like solar panels, we just bought a brand new solar panel, so I'm in the middle of figuring out, okay, how are we going to unfurl this in flight, and how are we going to make it stable, and how are we going to hang it, and what sort of wire do we need? So there's all kind of, we're constantly having discussions about all the equipment and how do we fine tune it, how do we minimize weight to be able to carry more sand and therefore have more endurance.
Don, we're talking about long duration flights, 2, 3, 4 days and nights. We're talking about the pilots who are able to relieve each other. One can rest as the other is taking on the piloting duties. Do you have a team of Met folks who work with you? Because as the weather advisor, you can't say, well, I'm going to go, take a nap and be gone for 2 or 3 hours. And because weather may develop during that time, that might change something. How involved is your end of a Gordon Bennett flight dealing with weather in that regard over the long duration of these flights?
Well, thankfully, I been able to have the help of meteorologist Randy Lefevre, who was able to help this year and in years past to put in basically some rotating shifts to be able to watch things. And then also to bounce ideas off of, because we're constantly getting new weather data in, new computer models, new trajectories from the Dandelion program that the team is running in the command center. So I can't do it solo, especially with the time change. If you're not over there and you're dealing with the I think we were dealing with a 7-8 hour difference. Between where I was and the pilots. So you got to be able to adjust the time when the data is coming in, but also when they need to make decisions. And, this is something that's really critical, is that weather decisions have to be made at certain times of the day, whether or not they're going to continue through the night, land in the afternoon, what they're going to do in the morning. So it's you're very much wedded to the clock, so to speak, in terms of timing your weather information, getting new weather information, and trying to catch a nap or two here in between updates.
So, Randy, are you tied to that same sort of clock then when Don has new information? Or are you and the folks in the command center the people who are relating this up to the teams, or are they communicating rather directly back and forth with Don? I'm curious about what the overall role is of the command center in communication, both individually to the teams, and are you at sometimes relaying to team 1 what team 2 is doing and what decision team 3 might be making, so that, again, all 3 teams have a sense of what the group is doing while they're, again, competing individually?
Sure. Yeah. The communication tools we use this year, primarily WhatsApp, has been a terrific tool in keeping the communication across the team, not only amongst all the pilots. So they had open dialogue, but we could have individual communication with the teams as well. Certainly internal to the command center. Once we have the balloons launch, basically the command center sets up 24/7 operation until the last balloon lands. And during that time, we're monitoring weather, seeing what the forecasted update every 6 hours, and conferring with both Don and Randy Lefevre on that, discussing strategy. So some of the very experienced gas balloon pilots, as part of the command center, at those decision points throughout the day, will have a separate call where Don, Randy Lefevre, those pilots, and myself will discuss what we're seeing, what the different weather models are showing, some of our trajectory tools, and then consolidating that down to clear, concise information to relate to the pilots. We certainly want to make sure they're fully aware of the situation for the next several hours into the race, but we also don't want to share too much information when they're tired, fatigued. Clear, concise instructions, and here's when we'll speak to you next. During that whole time, too, the command center team's monitoring the airspaces. If there's any areas coming up that we need to clear, get permission to fly through, and coordinating that with the balloons as well. And then as we get towards the end of the race and balloons are landing, we turn into kind of a landing specialist and seeing what locally the winds are doing, what the current conditions are, what the pilot should expect as they're descending down, both in terms of weather and the suitability of the landing area.
I don't want to get, I certainly don't want to be accused of going for locker room humor here. So please bear with me on this and understand the intent behind the question. Nora, I don't know why I keep doing, I'm sorry. It's a combination of Barbara and Noah. Noah and Barbara, you fly as a team. We don't have them with us tonight, but Mark West and Sherry White have flown together as a team. And where I'm going with this is, what about issues, without getting into too many details, of intimacy? Noah brought up going to the toilet while you're in flight for 2 or 3 days, which you're going to have to do. Are these discussions, is that more difficult for a mixed sex team? Is it, am I being naive and it's a nonchalant sort of attitude? Is it something you discuss ahead of time? How does one deal with that? Is that a challenge that you have to face that perhaps another team of 2 guys doesn't have to worry about?
I would say so. Yeah, it's something we discussed before flying, before we ever flew together. And Brenda's very gracious. She gives me privacy. I give her privacy. And it's kind of, you go to the other corner of the basket and lean over and maybe put some headphones on if you need to. And but you busy yourself with other things and try to give that person privacy and so they can be comfortable. But yeah,
it's got to be hard to find privacy for 2 people in a 4-foot square basket, though. I mean,
it is.
We had $100 wager, so whoever lost the bet or used the big green bucket first had to pay $100. And luckily, nobody had to give up $100. But I will say that Jim disappeared into the woods not long after we landed.
Brenda, I'm curious about the female side of that question.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's really no big deal. Gone so far as to take a blanket and just put it totally over myself. So that way I can't see anything, nobody else can see in. And I've done this not just with Noah, but sometimes with training flights too. I've actually needed to use the bucket during a training flight and had multiple male pilots in the basket with me. So they just had to deal with it.
Okay. All right. Well, as I say, I didn't want to go for locker room humor. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've had people say that, not many women would do what Brenda does, and she's pretty badass, I gotta say.
Well, I've known that about Brenda for a long time. And as I say, I'm not looking for locker room humor, but hey, in the movie Apollo 13, they did ask Tom Hanks, how do you go to the bathroom up there? So I figure it's a legit question. With regard to that, and remotely, do you go on, let's talk about what do you eat while you're in the air? Do you do special diets beforehand to maybe enhance not needing the green bucket? What types of dietary concerns are there in flight? How do you prepare your food? Is it all cold beans out of a can? Give us an idea of what the gourmet menu is like when you're flying in the Gordon Bennett.
I'll go. Yeah, certainly. You talked about dieting. We do, or at least I do, for months before the race, diet, but not for the reasons you mentioned. For the reasons of losing weight, having lower mass means, again, taking more sand and having more endurance. So I, for months beforehand, have a graph in my kitchen. What's my goal weight today, and am I above it or below it? So can I cheat, or do I have to be really good and try to do a linear, reduction in weight until launch day. But as far as what we eat, that's a very important consideration, because that act of eating every day is just it's a point for us to come together to discuss our strategy, to get some nourishment, but also it's one of the few pleasures of obviously the view is beautiful when you're flying, but eating is really uplifting. And having hot food is I learned early on, I didn't have any means of hot food when Bert and I started flying together. And we talked a lot about the risks of having, open combustion stove and a hydrogen balloon. And the hydrogen's well overhead and goes up very quickly. So, and a lot of folks have done it for a long time. So we decided to do it. But having, the ability to make hot coffee, to be able to make hot meals is very important for your mental outlook. And so we often bring dehydrated meals. Those are pretty lightweight, and the quality of those are very good now. So we've been taking some of those. But other than that, it's a lot of comfort food snacks. One of our splurges is we bring chocolate covered espresso beans. So those are great. If you need a pick me up, we've always got those on hand on our flights.
I'm curious. We haven't talked at all about crew on a gas flight. And we're quickly running out of time here, so I want to get on to a couple of other subjects. But is the role of the ground crew significantly different on a gas flight, and particularly a long distance flight like the Gordon Bennett, versus what it is in the typical hot air balloon flight? One of you pilots maybe address that?
Well, for our ground crew this year, it was kind of boring. I think they spent a night or two in a hotel, and they ate well. And occasionally, we had pictures of them sitting around having a beer with the balloon in the background. So we weren't going anywhere fast this year, so it wasn't too taxing on them. But still, when it was time to land, we had to kind of wake them up and tell them our flight was about done, and they were there 5 minutes after we hit the ground. So pretty amazing 32 hours later that they can be that close and ready for us. But they were fully prepared to go to Romania or Copenhagen if necessary.
Now, you guys all have, and I guess, Randy, the role of the command center is, and certainly the event command center is processing a lot of that government regulations, requirements, paperwork, so that the balloons can fly through various countries and airspace regulations. The ground crew, though, Johnny, as you're talking about now, if they're having to travel from France to Romania to Italy to wherever, they have to go through passport control and all of that sort of thing, or does the command center get involved in negotiating a lot of that as well?
Well, with Europe, most of the borders are open, so that part's not too difficult. There are some countries that it is a little more difficult to go in and out of, but for the most part, this day and age, having the proper vignette on the toll tag on the vehicle going through the different countries is kind of usually the most difficult part of that whole process.
We've got just a couple of minutes left. I want to get to a question from our viewers. Dave Boyle, who it looks like is watching from the UK tonight, is asking, what are the pros and cons of using hydrogen over helium? We've virtually been priced out of helium as an option for gas ballooning in the past years and started using hydrogen. But I don't know. Again, either of you three pilots who want to jump in on that, any significant pros and cons of using one over the other? And nowadays, do we really have a choice?
We don't really have a choice to fill. Go ahead, Johnny.
Oh, I was just going to say, in the United States, helium kind of quickly became no longer an option, and hydrogen's right behind that with the scarcity of it right now. But I've flown both, and I think helium's a nicer gas to fly. It's maybe a little bit more stable, has to do with lapse rates, but Noah can probably speak better to that. But the hydrogen, I think, technically has a little bit more lift, but it's a little more volatile toward the end. It tends to take a little bit more to stop it from going up and keep it from coming down. But they're both just a delight to be able to fly.
Noah?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. This is going to be okay. Two more questions. One, first of all, I'm curious, how truly competitive is the field of the Gordon Bennett? And I ask that in all seriousness because we have, X number of teams, 20 odd teams, whatever it may be, that launch. And all of a sudden, after the first night, it seems like you've got people landing. And then you have those, and maybe this goes to Don's earlier discussions about risk, because then the race always ends up where you have 1, 2, maybe 3 teams that are just fighting it out and tooth and nail to the very end. Is everyone in the event truly there competitively, are there some pilots and balloons that are flying maybe to gain the experience to compete later on? I'm just curious overall, how truly competitive is the field at the Gordon Bennett on an average basis? And again, I'm sorry, I guess I should be directing these toward somebody, but I'm saving a last question for Brenda, so I don't want her to jump in on here.
When we landed, and I was talking to Regan and Mark Andre on Gordon Bennett Live, I had this kind of big realization. And 20 years ago when I competed, I thought in order to win one of these events, you just had to be a little bit crazy and a little bit of a daredevil and just kind of last through some weather situations you weren't super comfortable with. And I landed with a wholly newfound respect for the top competitors in gas ballooning and what Kurt Frieden does and Benny Eimers do, and a whole list of people. Absolutely impressive. They are masters of their craft. They have the best teams behind them. They're not just daredevils getting in a balloon and going for a wild ride. It is calculated. It's committed. They're thinking about this 24/7 every single day of the year. They're already planning and have their charts and things planned out for the next Gordon Bennett. So I left there with a huge appreciation for every one of those other pilots that were capable of doing way more than was on the table for us.
That's interesting coming from a competitor in the hot air world of your caliber. Johnny, thank you. Last question, Brenda, and I've been saving this one for you. I am so envious of all of you of having had the experience of flying in a gas balloon. I've never enjoyed that. And I'm asking this of Brenda particularly because forgive me, I don't mean this in a sexist way, but I believe women have a certain capability to take in the romance of an event, of a situation, sometimes more than we guys can. What is it like to spend a night under a canopy of stars and a silent flight that you enjoy in gas ballooning? That to me has got to be the most amazing experience in the world, and I'm so jealous that I cannot experience and likely never will experience that.
It is absolutely stunning. I mean, truly, there's nothing like it. Everybody in the world should be able to do this one time at least. I think there would be more peace on the planet if everybody could see the world the way that we get to see the world. Honestly, I mean, flying up, on the north side of the Sandia Mountains and seeing shooting stars, you're at 12,000 feet in the air. They just seem that much closer. I mean, it's just like you could reach out and touch them. It's beautiful. Everything's beautiful, everything that you see. And even the different countries, the way when you're flying over the different countries, the landscape, they all look so different. You don't see the same thing twice. It's truly, truly amazing.
The images that have been shared online of sunsets and sunrises from the gas balloons are just, to me, are always amazing. We're done for the evening. Thank you all very much for taking your time and sharing your expertise with us and with our viewers. We hope that you've enjoyed this discussion on gas ballooning. There's a lot that we would like to have gone on and discussed even further, but time is a consideration. So thanks for viewing this edition of Inside the BFA. Fly safe, and we will see you again sometime very soon. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for viewing this episode of Inside the BFA. Membership in the Balloon Federation of America is your entry into the sport of ballooning. Whether you're a pilot, crew, or an enthusiast, everyone is welcome inside the BFA. For more information, see our website at www.bfa.net.